This is Land of Havilah, Proverbs 13, verse 1. A wise son listens to his father's instruction, but a scoffer doesn't listen to rebuke. Comment: a scoffer is someone who reacts with scorn and derision. It might be appropriate to scoff at evil, but obviously it's a bad idea to scoff at wisdom. Verse 2. By the fruit of his lips a man enjoys good things, but the unfaithful crave violence. Comment: if a man says the right things, he'll get good things. If he's unfaithful in what he says, he's asking for trouble. Verse 3. He who guards his mouth guards his soul. One who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Comment: when you guard your mouth, you guard your soul. Speak rashly, and you'll come to ruin. Verse 4. The soul of the sluggard desires and has nothing, but the desire of the diligent shall be fully satisfied. Comment: the lazy person desires but doesn't get because he's not willing to work for it. The diligent person is willing to work for it, and barring some obstacle, he'll get what he wants. Verse 5. A righteous man hates lies, but a wicked man brings shame and disgrace. Comment: a righteous man hates lies and doesn't disgrace himself by telling them, but a wicked man tells lies and brings shame and disgrace on himself and everyone he's associated with. Verse 6. Righteousness guards the way of integrity, but wickedness overthrows the sinner. Comment: either a person's righteousness guards him or his wickedness overthrows him. Verse 7. There are some who pretend to be rich, yet have nothing. There are some who pretend to be poor, yet have great wealth. Comment: some pretend to be rich, some pretend to be poor, so we might be surprised who's rich and who's poor. It reminds your narrator of a story about a rich man in his small town who wore overalls and gave the impression of being poor. He went to a Porsche dealership in the city, and the salesman asked him how he was planning to pay. He pulled a wad from his overalls and said, "with this." So that's how the story goes anyway. Verse 8. The ransom of a man's life is his riches, but the poor hear no threats. Comment: if you're rich, you're a target. You might even be kidnapped and held for ransom. If you have nothing, you're not so much a target. Verse 9. The light of the righteous shines brightly, but the lamp of the wicked is snuffed out. Comment: the righteous person will thrive, the wicked person will come to ruin. Verse 10. Pride only breeds quarrels, but wisdom is with people who take advice. Comment: a prideful person argues, a wise person listens. Verse 11. Wealth gained dishonestly dwindles away, but he who gathers by hand makes it grow. Comment: dishonest gain dwindles away, honest gain accumulates more and more. Verse 12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when longing is fulfilled, it's a tree of life. Comment: when something hoped for doesn't come on time, it's a big disappointment, but when it comes, it's satisfying. Verse 13. Whoever despises instruction will pay for it, but he who respects a command will be rewarded. Comment: if you reject instruction, you'll pay. If you accept instruction, you'll get paid. Verse 14. The teaching of the wise is a spring of life to turn from the snares of death. Comment: wise instruction can turn a person from the way of death to the way of life. Verse 15. Good understanding wins favor, but the way of the unfaithful is hard. Comment: morality and fair play attract people's favor, but if someone's an immoral jackass, he invites opposition. Quoting it again, good understanding wins favor, but the way of the unfaithful is hard. Verse 16. Every prudent man acts from knowledge, but a fool exposes folly. Comment: a prudent man's behavior exposes his knowledge, but a fool's behavior exposes his error. Verse 17. A wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a trustworthy envoy gains healing. Comment: if someone's relaying a message for us or transacting business for us, there's no telling how they might get us in trouble if they're wicked, or how they might keep us out of trouble if they're trustworthy. Quote, a wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a trustworthy envoy gains healing. Verse 18. Poverty and shame come to him who refuses discipline, but he who heeds correction shall be honored. Comment: we have to swallow our pride to submit to discipline or to heed correction. Then there's the additional factor of figuring out if the discipline or correction is warranted. Let's say we're adults and some legal penalty has been assessed against us, or maybe our employer has corrected us. We won't see the situation clearly without humility. Verse 19. Longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul, but fools detest turning from evil. Comment, sometimes in Solomon's Proverbs it's hard to figure out the connection between part A and part B. In this proverb, part A is longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul, and part B is but fools detest turning from evil. There's wisdom in the separate parts, but we'll understand the proverb more fully if we can connect the two parts. If we desire a good thing, we call it longing. If we have a guilty desire, we call it lust. In both cases, there is desire, so the proverb's pointing out that deep desires go in both directions. One fulfills if it's a desire for something good, and the other destroys if it's a desire for something bad. Verse 20. One who walks with wise men grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm. Comment, keep the right company. Wise men will teach you wisdom. Fools will teach you how to destroy yourself. Verse 21. Misfortune pursues sinners, but prosperity rewards the righteous. Comment, misfortune chases sinners, and prosperity chases the righteous. This proverb stops short of saying misfortune will catch up with the sinner. His evil might not catch up with him in this life, but it's always chasing him. Verse 22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the wealth of the sinner is stored for the righteous. Comment, here's another proverb that isn't universally true. It was never meant to be. Many proverbs, this one included, express tendencies, not absolutes. This one says, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, end quote. That's not universally true, of course. A good man can be poor and have no grandchildren. If he does have family and they have any sense, they'd rather inherit a good name and legacy from him than money. But the proverb doesn't address any of that. That's all off the subject. It only points out that if he has something to leave his grandchildren, it reflects well on him. There's nothing saying he has to have money or grandchildren to be good. Putting the second half of the proverb onto that, the overall point of the proverb is that wealth gained honestly is more durable than wealth gained dishonestly, which tends to dissipate rapidly. Verse 23. An abundance of food is in poor people's fields, but injustice sweeps it away. Comment, a thoughtless and cursory reading of the Proverbs might lead someone to believe that, in Solomon's mind, industry and good morals inevitably lead to wealth, while laziness and wickedness lead to poverty. It's not that he was dogmatic and had a black and white view of the world. It's that he trusted the reader to have enough sense not to mistake a general rule for an absolute one. In the proverb we just read, he points out there are some poor not because they're lazy and wicked, but because of injustice. The poor in this proverb were diligent. They farmed their land and grew a crop, but the crop was stolen by injustice. Verse 24. One who spares the rod hates his son, but one who loves him is careful to discipline him. Comment, there used to be a popular proverb, spare the rod and spoil the child. It was probably inspired by this proverb, one who spares the rod hates his son, but the one who loves him is careful to discipline him. Bygone generations paid attention to this proverb. They used corporal punishment and raised some great generations of children. Then a modern teaching began in 1946 with a popular book on child rearing by Dr. Benjamin Spock. He was an office-based pediatrician. It was one of the first popular books on the subject of child rearing. Never mind, Spock wrote not from the authority of an actual parent, but from the authority of an office-based pediatrician. He had no children of his own until a year after the book came out. According to the New York Times, it was the second best-selling book behind the Bible for 52 years. Spock discouraged corporal punishment. Before then, corporal punishment was the long-standing norm. Afterwards, not so much. The listener can judge for himself whether Spock's effect on child rearing was for the better or worse. Personal story here, I think my father was a good example 60-plus years ago. We loved him and feared him. If I or my siblings committed some outstandingly wrong offense, He didn't swat that I ever remember. He took us to the basement, made us lean over an old couch, and put the paddle on our rears. It was terrifying. He didn't have to paddle us much because what little he did worked. He passed away when I was barely 6, but by then he'd already incorporated the basics in me with just those few paddlings. Not that in his absence I always did what I should, but at least I had a strong sense of what I should. To this day, I love and respect my father for his paddle. After the first pop, my mother was always marching down the stairs telling him it was enough. I appreciate her for that, too. So I know for a fact that respect for right and wrong can be set in a child very early by corporal punishment. I very well remember all the thought processes involved in my little mind and how he cured me of lots of foolishness. Better for a parent to fight those types of battles when the child is still very young, because the child will only get less compliant and more set in his ways as time goes by. As a concession to the other train of thought, my mother's father came out all right without any corporal punishment. When he was about 3 years old, he nearly ran over 2 women on the sidewalk with his tricycle. This would have been around 1910. The women complained to his father about it, and he said to them, "Why didn't you get out of his way?" So that was his method of child rearing. How did we get into all this? Because Solomon said in verse 24, "One who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him." Now that we've offended just about everyone, verse 25. The righteous one eats to the satisfying of his soul, but the belly of the wicked goes hungry. Comment: the righteous person gets satisfaction, but the wicked person doesn't. Nothing can satisfy the wicked except repentance and God's filling. No matter what the wicked gets, there'll still be an